All right, music livelihoods, Patreon and digital communities, alternative pathways for musician livelihoods. Technology continues to influence how audiences engage and interact with musicians, with emergent technology offering an alternative to the traditional distribution chain in that music could be bought and acquired electronically. However, emergent technology is now providing a feedback loop between artist and audience. We see this emergent technology in a variety of ways, and to explore this concept, this presentation investigates and theorises concepts of how contemporary Australian musicians are adapting their artistic practice by utilising the crowdfunding platform Patreon to develop, nurture and grow online fan communities. Through a digital ethnographic approach investigating the work of selected Australian musicians, it aims to examine the benefits gained for these musicians by engaging with the platform. These case studies present themes of artistic skill and story sharing, the creation and sharing of new and archival work, and participation in online digital cultural communities, thereby creating opportunities for musicians to craft a sustainable practice enabled by technology. Perhaps crowdfunding feels like a recent development in entrepreneurial financing. Crowdfunding, according to Ketchen, is a method of pooling often small amounts of capital from a potentially large pool of interested funders, with the entrepreneur directly engaging with the individuals providing the financial contributions. However, crowdfunding is not new. In 1885, Joseph Pulitzer funded the completion of the Statue of Liberty's pedestal by soliciting investments from the readership of his New York World newspaper, raising over $100,000, and that's 2.8 million in today's currency, not a bad campaign. Modern crowdfunding emerged after the year 2000, and Nesta, the UK's innovation agency, defines 4 different types of crowdfunding platforms: donations-based, rewards-based, equity-based, and lending-based. Many of the platforms used by creative practitioners utilize the rewards-based platform, where people contribute to a project in return for a non-financial reward, such as a copy of the finished work, tickets to an event, or merchandise of some kind. Research into crowdfunding has been extensive since the year 2000, with Ketchen, McKenney, Allison, and Ireland investigating determinants for crowdfunding success. Bors, Ferguson, and Moser found that successful crowdfunding projects do mobilise previously unknown funders, with creators able to extend the reach of their open call for donations through a careful and clear message on social media. Gerber, Kua, and Hui investigate motivation for participation in crowdfunding for creators and funders, finding that creators were motivated to participate to raise funds, receive validation, connect with others, replicate successful experiences of others, and expand awareness of work through social media. Hughes, Keith, Morrow, Evans, and Crowdy present engaging research on what constitutes artist success in the Australian music industry, finding emerging themes of the DIY model and the need to diversify into other industry roles, utilisation of grant funding, social media, online strategies, and audience reach and crowdfunding. Importantly, they highlight that due to changes in music consumption resulting from the advance of the internet and digital music, there's a change in the definition of career success. This shift has forced artists and other industry bodies to reconsider how they create sustainable careers, has altered the pre-digital definition of a music career, and has transformed conceptions of career success. To study the benefits that Australian musicians are deriving from engaging with Patreon, an inductive reasoning approach has been utilised in this research. This includes conducting one-on-one semi-structured interviews with 3 specific Patreon creators, professional Australian musicians, with each interview consisting of a developed series of questions, allowing for discussion to emerge from these initial questions. Further to this, a digital ethnographic approach is utilised, with the ethnographic inquiry acting as a method for enhancing understandings of meanings and how they come to be assigned with the technology and the cultural experiences that enable and are enabled by this digital medium. Crowdfunding platforms such as Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Possible are often project-based. Creators design projects, set financial targets and deadlines, and set about raising the funds from a large or small audience of followers. Once the target is reached, the project is complete. Funders receive their rewards, the creator realises the work, and everyone goes home happy. Patreon takes a different approach. As Tobias Regner explains, Patreon turns the one-off interaction between the creator and the crowd into a continuous relationship. It facilitates the presentation and communication of past, present, and planned content, and allows patrons to support creators of all kinds with a monthly pledge. This kind of ongoing relationship can also be called a digital patronage. While project-based platforms are more unidirectional, Patreon encourages the creation of a kind of 21st century digital fan club The platform encourages creators to treat those patrons less like charitable benefactors and more like members who have purchased admission to this club, entitling them to exclusive perks. This ongoing payment is not seen as transactional, as the project-based crowdfunding platforms are. It's more of a means for Patreon creators to share creative work and give fans an intimate socio-economic dimension to this relationship. Their goal is somewhat lofty: to fund the creative class. Perhaps this is inspired by Richard Florida's 2002 work, The Rise of the Creative Class, in which Florida posed the notion that creativity wasn't merely a human attribute, but a basic drive and potentially a fundamental, irreducible economic principle. This creative class theory encompasses the broad idea that economic growth is driven first and foremost by people as opposed to firms, with creativity not simply being a technological innovation, but increasingly the principal driver of economic life. While the research of Regner and Borst, Ferguson and Moser look at crowdfunding success based on communication quality and uses of social media, the research presented here puts the focus on the campaign creators, investigating their usage of the platform and how it contributes to their professional activity, career sustainability, artistic benefits, and strategies for continued usage. Case studies. The professional musicians selected for the case studies in this research are all high-level artistic practitioners. Barney McCall is an award-winning award-winning jazz pianist and composer with experience working around the world in groups led by Gary Bartz, Sia, Joss Roseman, and Kurt Rosenwinkel. Sarah McLeod is the songwriter and performer from the ARIA-winning platinum-selling rock group The Super Jesus, and Ben Solder, performing songwriter working in the styles of rock, pop, jazz, folk and country in solo capacities and with the groups the ARIA-nominated Wilson Pickers, Gin Club, and the Giants of Science. Motivations. McCall, Salter, and McLeod set up their Patreon pages in 2020, 2018, and 2020, respectively, with each having between 120 and 200 patrons on their pages. McCall and McLeod initiated their setup in response to the dwindling number of gigs due to COVID restrictions, with Salter's setup precipitated by an interstate move and a house purchase. Salter and McCall each speak to the hustling and survival type activation. McCall goes further, though, explaining the intention to create a dignified exchange rather than just creating a digital tip jar. He says, and I've been teaching down here for 3 years or whatever, 2 universities, so I managed to quantify a lot of concepts and ideas, and I was like, hang on, I can really use these to just survive. It's also a kind of dignified way to cope when there's no gigs. McCall and Solder both speak to the platform as a driver to reshape audience expectations for payment for work and move against the barrage of freely available content on the internet. McCall refers to the Patreon site as a paywall, where he will direct anyone who's interested in my stuff to my paywall. And also to be an artist that says to other artists, put up a paywall. That's what I'm saying by doing this, but also a symbol to say, hey, don't give away all your stuff for likes. Solder connects with this concept relating to the sustainability of audiences, noting that, and he says, if we're serious about changing the models and implementing more sustainable models for everything, then people just need to be prepared to have 200 fans. This development of a committed fan base harks back to Kevin Kelly's 2008 essay on 1,000 true fans, where Kelly explains that having 1,000 true fans that you maintain direct contact with is an alternative pathway to success. McLeod set up a Patreon page encouraged by a colleague at the conclusion of a live stream performance. The performance is free, but viewers were encouraged to join McLeod's Patreon at the conclusion of the show. She says, so the night before I prepared all the software, got all the logos set up, and I played the performance. And then I got on and said, okay, thanks. If you enjoyed it, if you want to join my page, and pretty much everyone I have joined in that moment. The content shared by patrons by McCall, Salter, and McLeod each cover a range of media, with Salter and McLeod posting 200 and 279 posts respectively, and McCall posting 70 times since the inception of the page. When asked about the strategy for the content, each artist gave a similar response, highlighting that they posted content they felt was interesting, something they didn't have a current vehicle for. As McCall explains, he says, when I first published the Patreon site, I thought, what am I going to put on it? But as soon as I pressed publish, I had this kind of paradigm shift from like, hang on, I've got so much stuff on various hard drives into my mind and what I've learned. This is going to be fun because it's like I'm putting out, manifesting what I know, and people can share it for God knows how long. Solder notes that he blends new and archival material, letting the moment take him from when it needs to be shared. His extensive catalogue of recorded content from gigs to studio sessions forms a strong foundation for what he distributes. McLeod's approach to content delivery is more abstract, with her subscribers gaining a sense of insight into the creative process and her musical activity. She says, if I'm doing something fun, I just hit live and I go live directly into the wall saying, hey, look, I've been doing this here, check it out. And I sort of show them what I'm doing. And when it's a good vibe, then I write something and I send it to them. McCall gets creative. His page feels like the audio-visual extension of his wide-ranging musical habits and stylistic diversity. Often dressed in a bizarre attire, the edgy video clips mixed with improvised verbal delivery give a raw and personal approach to the content. Benefits. Apart from the creation of the ongoing income stream, precipitated by lockdowns experienced in COVID-19, some of the other positive benefits for musicians have emerged in this research. Digital resource. Patreon has enabled the creation and curation of an online digital resource in a multimedia way that enables each creator to communicate a sense of musical identity and share knowledge. For McCall specifically, Patreon has become an asynchronous teaching platform where he's able to share knowledge from his years of professional activity with a range of artists. McCall uses the platform to create custom videos explaining concepts, and he adds PDF downloads to contextualize these. He explains that they are teaching modules where he talks about a certain aspect of musical theory or approaches to jazz and improvisation. Edlam and Carlson write about interactive engagement with fans and how digital promotion cultures give opportunity for fans to engage via social media and in real life. And in this research, the fan engagement is viewed from the artist's perspective. Bonifacia, Hare, and Wone examine the creator-fan relationship, looking at the spectrum from little emotion investment to a strong family-like bond. And the creation of exclusive and supportive community of music lovers is a central theme in these case studies. McLeod's Wolfies are a close group of McLeod supporters, forming relationships with each other and the artists that go deeper than just attending a gig or watching a video of an unreleased track. McLeod notes that she wants to keep the community small so they can support each other, lift each other up and give feedback, something that doesn't happen in the cold, hard world. He might not be so excited about it. Solder mentions how he has this sense that his followers want to be part of his creative process, saying that a lot of the reason why people pay the $5 a month or whatever, for me, they might not necessarily watch everything I post, but they just want the feeling of being part of things that I create. His followers take time to connect with him at live performances, giving a physical dimension to this digital community. Solder says that engagement comes at shows where patrons attend and tell him how much they enjoy the content. McCall also touches on the concept of re-empowering artists so they can connect with fans, leveraging other digital platforms to enhance the reach of the Patreon community. He says, and I quote, "We're talking about an independent community. I see Patreon as that. And actually, I've just connected my Discord server with Patreon just because it's a fantastic way to develop community." McLeod draws potential patrons into the sense of community in a written statement on Patreon designed to introduce people to what she provides. She clearly articulates how she wants to find fans who care enough to put skin in the game and deal directly with them. It's a more economical way of working. Motivation to create. Interestingly, the existence of the recurring committed audience acts as a motivating factor for the creation of new musical content or the sharing of archived material that does not have public release. This motivation to keep creating is highly relevant in the disruption-affected music industry and gives artists an outlet for new work to an audience that is hungry for it. McLeod highlights this element as the key driver in the usage of Patreon, but she doesn't even think of it as creating content, but more as a part of her creative process. She says, "I know a few other people who've done it, Patreon. They didn't really enjoy it because they feel the pressure of having to make content. But I don't even think about it because I don't think about it as content." McLeod uses the existence of a community to motivate her to create, making her accountable, where she's bound to a timeline and needs to deliver music to her caring audience. Salter funnels current and archival work through his Patreon, using it as a release portal, promoting newly recorded album and a large swathe of live recordings. As mentioned, the platform allows for financial security and ensures that he'll be paid for these releases. Solder's motivation and benefit looks to connect work, sharing, and financial stability. He discusses the ideal situation where patrons would drive audiences at live performance, taking the digital community into the physical world. Solder also touches on the importance of platforms such as this, addressing how people view the value of content, moving away from the free model promoted by streaming platforms such as Spotify. He notes, but yeah, it's sort of trying to push people into this, well, if you want something, you have to pay for it. It's funny what people are willing to pay for. People will buy a bottle of water.
1 minute.
McCall echoes these statements, noting how he feels that the current music industry situation has become grotesquely greedy, with major platforms of social media and streaming giants, leading people to believe that content is free. He articulates that things are changing. Patreon and all the other things that I mentioned, Twitch, Discord, cryptocurrency, you can't stop it. By using Patreon, McCall is able to filter people into his world, allowing to pay for content that he curates. The challenging circumstances in the Australian music industry that emerged during COVID-19 has given musicians some motivations to seek out an increased range of technological solutions that empower them to have a sustainable music career. Crowdfunding is a model that can allow for direct interaction between the creator and crowd, and Patreon is one platform utilised by Australian musicians in this way. The case studies in this research point to benefits that are more artistically and community focused and personally and socially relevant outside of the ongoing financial support to musicians that fans provide through this platform. McCall, Salter and McLeod have each created personal digital spaces to share their artistic work, using Patreon to motivate, share, quantify and teach, while creating loyalty in audiences that may transfer out of the digital experience into other domains, including live performances. This study is limited in that it uses 3 established artists as case studies, investigating their approach specifically. Future research should take into account and continue to examine Australian musicians, taking in a wider survey of emerging and established artists, investigating types of content disseminated and benefits to musicians as the Australian music industry moves forward in the COVID-19 affected environment and 21st century music models. Thank you.
Great, fantastic, Sean. Thank you so much. A really good explanation of a different kind of model that people can embrace. But I particularly like the angle of community building. That's fantastic. I'll just open it to the floor. Does anyone have any questions? I have questions, always have questions, but if anyone's got any questions. Yes, we have a hand up from Kath.
Thanks, Sean. That was really interesting. I want to ask about whilst the people that the case studies, obviously very keen to get content going, they're very driven by that, and putting up content, it's a real task. And so you did juxtapose that with others who said they just couldn't keep up the content. Once you've got a loyal audience, keeping up that content is really something that you just have to do. Have you found with those case studies where they've flagged a little bit and they've found that they haven't quite had that content going up as regularly as they'd like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kath. Yeah, look, I think some of those case studies were almost kind of anti-creating the content. Like one of them specifically almost didn't want to even do it, and he was kind of starting it out of necessity, and then was turning into this way of, well, I'm just going to use what I'm already doing. So if I'm doing something, I'm going to record that and share it. So it was almost a bit of a mindset shift to what I do is valuable, and I just want to, and I need to share this with these people who are interested in what I'm doing, whether that's a new song that I'm writing at home and I'm going to share that demo, or it's a little gig that I've done and I recorded it, or something really old that I've had sitting around that I've had for ages and never shared. And now they're sharing. So they're these things that are seeing the light of day that never would.
Yeah. So they can use stuff that they've got stored away. Yeah,
and it's forming this kind of this basis of the content. It doesn't have to be new all the time. And I think that was a bit of a shift, for their thinking, is it doesn't need to be new. It can be things that you've got. But
so keeping an archive is really important.
Absolutely. And one of them was noting that he's like, I've got so much stuff recorded, I can really start to churn it out. Another one of the case studies talked about that she was writing so many songs that she was probably never going to release them. She didn't want to, but she's happy to share them with this group. So it was a way of almost kind of road testing things or sharing demos with a really close group who were likely to receive them positively, hopefully. But on the flip side, if you are an emerging artist, or you don't have any of that catalog, or that is quite intimidating to have to share so much, that would be a very difficult situation.
Can I just ask, Sean, would you go back after is there an after the pandemic? I don't know. Would you go back in, say, 3 years' time and re-interview those case studies and see where they are with it?
That would be great. I would love to. One of them in particular is like, I want to do this as much as possible. I'd like to turn this into my main gig.
Right.
I love it. And I think also part of that is trying to encourage other people that this is a way for audiences to pay for content that they would otherwise potentially get for free via video streaming sites and things like that. So we're trying to re-educate these people about you should pay for all content, even if you're paying $8 a month or $5 a month, you should still pay for it as opposed to accessing it freely.
Thanks, Sean.
No worries.
Yeah, brilliant. No, I've got one little question for you, Sean. One researcher, Christina Scharf, she did a study on women and self-promotion and just their engagement with being with community, and they found that they were actually sort of reasonably quite reluctant to do that, more so than men. And I've also noticed with the Ormers that for women, so the Australian Women in Music Awards, that the women are more likely to go for those awards via their agents, etc. But just doing it for themselves, they sort of feel quite sort of ick. And I was just wondering if in your studies and your research, or just general talking with people, that you noticed a bit of a gender imbalance or preference, or are there statistics on that? Does Patreon sort of have those kinds of levels of statistics?
Yeah, I don't know if they do. That is not something I've done a lot of research on. It would be interesting to see if there is any imbalance. In those particular case studies, Sarah was a really interesting case, because she, of her own admission, is reluctant to be in that situation where she's essentially asking for contributions. Like, I don't want to ask you to pay for it, just take it. Don't put me on the merch desk. I'm the person who gives everything away. And so she's really using it in a super community focused way. Like, she's all about, I'm developing this tribe of people who are into music, and as a byproduct, they're paying me for that access, and that's great. That encourages me and funds me to keep making that access and making the music and keeping the community going.
Yeah.
So she's really into putting herself out there, but from a very different perspective, like not from a business perspective and not from a career. It's more just, I just want to hang out with these friends that I've made who are into my music and are really nice people.
Yeah, that sounds like a great way to be.
Yeah. And then she said, I actually don't want any more people in this. I want to keep it just with my kind of, there's 180 of them or something. I don't want any more because it's too unwieldy. I'd like to just keep it with this special group.
Yeah,
which is quite interesting that it's just a thing.
She's got a family.
But it is open, so if anyone wants to join, they can.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sean. That was great insight to the crowdfunding platforms, and a really good thing, I think, that we can also educate to our up and coming musicians as well. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.